Good morning and welcome to the Foggy Dew. This is Colin. Well, gang, it's been a little bit of a crazy week around the old Foggy Dew household. But I had a couple hours to myself and I just had an absolute ton of notes. So I figured I'd go ahead and record a show for you as you go into the weekend. Now, looking forward to next week, I'll probably get 2 shows out. I'm probably targeting Tuesday and Thursday at this point. But I guess either which way that goes, I just really appreciate everyone listening, number one. And then number two, as always, just watch out for new content dropping. But thank you guys. So I'll go ahead and start the show off with a quick note. And what I wanted to say first was rest in peace, Lou Holtz. If you didn't see, Lou Holtz passed away on Wednesday. And it really kind of didn't stop me in my tracks because he'd been sick for a while, but Lou Holtz was a legendary coach, but a much better human being. And it just really made me think that not only do they not make coaches like that anymore, they really don't make men like that anymore. It's just a dying breed. But if you look at Coach Holtz specifically, he was a man that built his teams based on faith, based on discipline, based on personal responsibility. Coach built men. He built character. And I think that's something that's forgotten about in today's game. And quite frankly, in all sports, right? You're only going to be an athlete so many years, right? You might be a college athlete for 3 or 4 years? You're going to be a father your whole life. You're going to be a husband your whole life. The things that really matter, the things that Coach Holtz talked about, faith, discipline, personal responsibility, those are the things that matter. And quite frankly, I wish we had 1,000 Coach Holtzes because I think the world would be a better place. And I think we would have a lot better young men if that was the case. But Coach Holtz was a shining star, and I'm really going to miss him. So thank you, Coach Holtz, for everything you did. Please rest in peace. So I wanted to follow up on some of the comments that I had the other day. And what I really wanted to do right now was talk big chessboard. And what I really wanted to do, big chessboard, is talk about China. Now, I have spent a lot of time on the Foggy Dew over the last, 4 months or so, talking about China and the domestic issues that they have. China has some very, very serious issues internally. They have domestic issues popping up all over the place. And I guess the easiest place to start is the Chinese economy. The Chinese economic model is based on compounding credit. And I've talked about it on the show before. China's credit has gone ice cold. People are holding on to assets. They're not seeking new credit. Well, when you have credit freezing like that, what happens is you have currency deflation. So you've got kind of a double whammy in your economy. Well, on top of those economic issues, China, which is a homogenous society, is really experiencing an acute population decline. And that's really a symptom of 2 things. If a native-born population is not replacing itself with babies, that indicates A, the economy is terrible, or B, the citizen has absolutely no faith in a brighter tomorrow being provided by the government. But either which way you want to look at it, that's a really big problem for homogenous society as population decline. Well, on top of those, 2 or 3 issues there, China is also experiencing a housing bust. Private home sales are collapsing in China, and they have for the last 4 or 5 years. Well, when you have private home sales collapsing, what does that do? That accelerates a credit freeze. Again, people are holding onto their home. They're holding on to assets. They're not seeking new credit. Well, it gets worse for China domestically. The New York Times on late Wednesday had a new report that came out about China's economy. It is official now that Chinese economy is officially contracting. China's economic growth rate was above 5% the last 3 decades. So China, again, had 3 decades of positive growth above 5%. Well, according to this report, China just released its economic projections moving forward. It will be at 4.5% target growth. Now, that might not seem like a big deal, but if you spent 3 decades above 5%, trust me, going below that number is a big deal. So here's the list: deflation, credit collapse, population decline, housing collapse, economic contraction. It is really hard to project power broadly if you're having those kind of internal issues. So again, those are internal issues to China with new data coming out about their economy. So look at some of the external things that China's dealing with then. China just lost the Western Hemisphere. It just lost the Western Hemisphere. Most importantly, China lost the US market. It hasn't lost it completely, but it's well on its way. China enjoyed about 21% of US imports just as a couple years ago. That number is down to about 7%. So they are losing their market share in the biggest consumer base in the world, which is the US. Why is that happening? Because of tariffs. Those tariffs, those import tariffs on Chinese goods, have slaughtered the Chinese. What it has also done has led to a reshoring effort of US manufacturing. We're seeing a lot of industries coming back and building plants in the US. The US is slowly rebuilding its manufacturing base. Huge win for the US. Really bad news for China. What else is going on in this hemisphere? They're losing Cuba. Cuba's toast. If you look at this entire situation globally, Cuba is in really bad spot. And we could talk about Cuba another day, but China lost Cuba. That's their buddy. That's their commie buddy in this hemisphere. What else has China lost in this hemisphere? Venezuela. They just lost all the oil coming out of Venezuela. What else did they lose in Venezuela? Gold. Venezuela has huge reserves of gold. What else did they lose in this hemisphere? What did China lose in this hemisphere? They basically lost all Latin American countries for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is you've seen this growth of right-wing populist governments in Latin America. Latin American countries got smart. They have a proximal interest in the United States as the world hegemon. Latin American countries, if you seek right-wing populist governments, you realize that getting stuff from China a world away is really not a good idea when you have a right-wing populist government in the world hegemon, the US. What else has China lost in this hemisphere? Canada. Donald Trump is not allowing China to play these games. Mark Carney can sit there and puff his chest out all he wants about cutting deals with China. China doesn't care anything about Mark Carney. All China cares about with Mark Carney is Canadian oil. But Donald Trump has already threatened 1,000% tariffs on Canada. That deal's not happening, so China is going to lose Canada. What else has China lost? They didn't just lose in this hemisphere. China lost India. The United States cut a massive deal with India. India is going to be buying US oil, natural gas. India is going to be taking in US imports at 0% tariffs. That is a massive deal for US manufacturing. But China is losing a partner in India. China is in the process of losing the EU as well. It's in the process of losing Western Europe. All of these Western European countries, Germany, France, England, Papa Trump came in and cut off the credit cards. He's making them stand up on their own. Now, these countries are flailing about. The EU is flailing about. They're trying to cut deals with India, with China. The United States and the Monroe Doctrine is not really going to let that happen, or there will be severe penalties for Western Europe. But I guess bottom line, that's not the main issue in Western Europe, but Chinese influence in Europe is definitely on the rocks. So I guess if you look at the big scope of this, look at a huge world map, and I want you to just think that China is losing markets to ship products to, and it's losing a lot of friends. It's being isolated. Always look at incentive structures. What really matters to China, the nation of China? The two things that matter most to China are what? Oil and exports. So let me start with oil, because that's one of the two, right? Let's talk oil. We all know this. China just lost Venezuelan oil. That is under US control. China just lost Iran. We just blew the Ayatollah into outer space the other day. Well, China then, if you lose Venezuela, if China loses Iran, what's their best bet for oil? Russia. Either which way it works out with Russia, China has a major oil problem. The problem with China is they do not have oil under their feet. They have to import oil. Well, all of this news about oil gets more interesting. I saw a report come out. China just froze all exports of diesel and gasoline. Bloomberg reported that. Well, what does that mean? They froze all exports of diesel and gasoline. What that means, that is a signal. China is in real trouble now. Without an oil source for China, they're going to have a lot of problems. Their factories are going to stop. Their shipping is going to stop. Civilian transport will stop. They got a math problem on oil. So what they're doing is they're stockpiling oil. Make up numbers here. If China needs 1 million barrels a day, but they only get in 500,000 barrels a day, they have a numerical problem with how much oil they consume. The problem with it is they're going to stock what they're doing by freezing exports. They're now stockpiling oil. They only have enough of a stockpile for 90 to 100 days. That's 90 to 100 days at 100% consumption. What happens when those stockpiles are gone? They don't have enough oil coming in to replace it. If they don't have enough oil coming in to replace it and keep their economy humming, they're screwed. Again, what did I just say? Without oil, their factories go down. Their shipping goes down. Civilian transport, you have to have oil. And guess what? They don't have a source for it. They have a numerical issue with their barrels of oil coming in. I guess the only place that they would be able to get oil then at that point is Russia. So this is a numbers game. What was the second thing I talked about? Exports. China needs to export products. It needs to manufacture products, then it needs to export products to keep its economy going. I just mentioned it a minute ago. If you ain't got oil, you can't manufacture. So if you don't manufacture, you can't export. So there are other mounting problems for China on exports. The main one being shipping. You have to, when you manufacture a product, you have to ship it on a boat over water. You don't just like Scotty beam it over to America. You put it on a boat on a shipping container and send it over. Well, what is the Chinese problem with shipping? Their main problem is the US Navy. But their secondary problem is the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal is the biggest shipping artery in the world. The Panama Canal is now closed to Chinese shipping. The US Navy owns that water. It owns that artery. China is not shipping anything through without our say-so. So if you look at it that way in the Western Hemisphere, China is not shipping in this hemisphere, and it's not shipping over across into Europe either, because that's how it would get over there. We own, meaning the United States owns, Chinese export capacity now. Well, I got even worse news for China. China just lost another shipping artery. It just lost the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is the second biggest shipping artery in the world. And I guess, open up a newspaper, the US Navy just destroyed Iran's Navy. So, in layman's terms, China just lost the Panama Canal and the Strait of Hormuz. So now they don't have any ability to ship. So again, what does China need? What are the two things? Oil and exports. Recap, it just lost Venezuelan oil. It just lost Iran oil. It needs exports. It just lost the Panama Canal and the Strait of Hormuz. China's in deep, 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 deep trouble here, guys. Deep trouble. So I want you to think about what I just said about China and all the problems they're having. And what I want you to think about this in the context of Iran. I'm here to tell you, Iran is a proxy war. Iran is a proxy war for China. I want you to think of Iran almost like a Chinese satellite state. China saw this chessboard. Okay? China saw this chessboard and they desperately, desperately, desperately needed Iran. They needed Iran for a couple reasons. They needed Iran for oil. They also needed to arm Iran. Why? They needed Iran to be able to control the Strait of Hormuz. Think about it this way. If China outfits Iran with new ballistic missiles, with military technology, China then, through its proxy Iran, can control shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. So China then was working Iran as a proxy to control oil and shipping in its own interests. China is why Iran. China is why now. China was aggressively arming Iran. They doubled down proactively because they saw the chessboard. They knew where this would go. Well, guess what? The United States saw it. That's what Donald Trump saw. He plays big chessboard. It's the downstream effect. Trump saw it. Rubio saw it. What you are seeing in Iran right now is a proxy war. And I want to be very clear because you're going to hear a lot of noise in the media. This is not an Israel deal. It's not. This is a big chessboard deal. The U.S. interest here in Iran is China. The U.S. interest in Iran regarding China happens to coincide with Israel's interest in the Middle East. Israel is benefiting here from a larger U.S. interest. And the only thing I can tell you about that, I'm seeing a lot in the media and I'm seeing a lot of people in the news. They keep talking about this as Israel's wagging the dog. This is Israel's goals in the Middle East about Iran. No. This is U.S. China first. Israel's along for the ride. I want to be very clear about that. But if you look at this entire situation, specifically with the oil, this is going to get really nuts really soon. China is a cornered rat here. They literally only have 90 to 100 days of oil. They're going to mathematically, they're going to run out of oil. Because what's going to happen is that the U.S. Navy is going to reign supreme on the water. The U.S. Navy can do anything it wants. The U.S. Navy can crush China without firing a shot. To be very clear, the U.S. Navy can control all shipping. We already control the two major arteries. So what does that mean? We can control Chinese exports, the thing they care about, and we can control all their imports, i.e. oil. So we got them coming and going. If you combine all of these external factors with the fact that the U.S. Navy is going to be pressuring China from the water, we control their imports, exports, combine those issues with China's internal problems, guys, you got, holy smokes. You're looking at a situation where within the next 6 months, no joke, China could collapse. And maybe not collapse, but they're going to have severe issues. I mean, I'm going to give you a thought experiment. Imagine if the US only got 50% of the oil it needed, like tomorrow. How much oil does the US consume a day? Make up a number. It doesn't matter, 1 million barrels. If 50% of that went away, what would happen? You couldn't even fill up your tank. Immediately, the gas pumps would go through the roof. You're paying $4 a gallon. All of a sudden, it's $20. Think of what that does to manufacturing. All of your costs explode. Overnight. It's not in a minute or two, it's overnight. And if all of that happened, imagine if gas went from $4 to $20 overnight. Civil unrest, economy implodes, market collapse. This is where China is. This is the reality of this, and they do not have the cards. Because the U.S. Navy, like I said, can shut them off without firing a shot. But as you're thinking about Iran and as you're watching this situation, I want you to think very carefully about the bigger chessboard and think very carefully about China. And think very carefully about China oil. And now they're stockpiling oil. Go look at Bloomberg and read the article. They're freezing exports of oil and gasoline. It's going to get crazy, guys. But trust me, I'll be watching all that. I think it's just totally fascinating. We are living, honestly, this looks like World War III that started like a couple of years ago. And it's World War III without nuclear bombs. This is economic warfare 101. We're living in a history book, man. Just stay tuned on the whole deal. So, I guess switching gears, but it's kind of a parallel topic. I wanted to make a quick note about this. Now, I think the other day on the show, I talked about Obama and Biden in regards to Iran. These two guys, Obama's plan with Iran, if you remember the Iranian nuclear deal, his plan was, quote, strategic optimism. Now, what was strategic optimism according to Barack Obama? This was Barack Obama's expert class, his cocktail circuit, think tank, leftist clowns idea. Their idea of strategic optimism was to unfreeze $56 billion to the psychos that run Iran. Barack Obama and these leftist expert class guys wanted to unfreeze $56 billion in fungible money. Strategic optimism, remember, right? They thought giving these the death cult psychos that run Iran $56 billion, I guess, to build rainbows, puppy dogs, hospitals, schools, that's what he thought would help. He thought normalizing Iran would make them better. Well, what did the psychos in the death cult and Iranian leadership do with that $56 billion? Well, they took that $56 billion and instead of strategic optimism, decided to spin their centrifuges. They decided to speed up ballistic missile production. They decided to expand their terrorist network. They decided to grow the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas. And I guess if you look at it in retrospect, Obama's Iranian nuclear deal was a starry-eyed disaster. And if you remember, what was the first thing that Donald Trump version 1 did when he got into office? The first thing Donald Trump version 1 did was he tore up Obama's Iranian nuclear deal. Almost the first thing he did when he got into office was freeze the money to the Iranian terror regime. Now, the interesting thing is you had everything that occurred with Trump in version 1, COVID, the debacle that was 2020. Well, here comes the cadaver Joe Biden. What did Joe Biden do? He leaned back on the expert class. Well, we can't believe Hitler. We can't believe Hitler froze the mullahs and Ayatollahs' money. Biden went ahead and opened up the money spigot again. He unfroze $16 billion for Iran. So here's the cadaver Joe Biden unfreezing $16 billion that Iran used with the exact same result. Now, I guess you might be sitting here, why is Colin ranting about this? Why am I talking about Obama and Biden's gaffes giving these crazy people billions of dollars? Well, I always watch the response. You guys know that. I always want to, it's like stimulus response. I always watch the response. Well, I've been watching very closely on what Barack Obama does. Barack Obama, since this whole thing with Iran kicked off, has not spoken publicly about Iran or this whole situation. He is very conspicuously quiet in this whole deal. Well, Thursday morning, he slithered out of whatever hole he's been hiding under to come out with a comment. Are you ready for this? Here's Barack Obama on Twitter on Thursday morning. And again, totally silent about Iran. Here's Barack Obama's first public comment, quote, "Free and fair elections are the cornerstone of our democracy, but right now they're under attack. Several Republican-controlled states have redrawn their congressional maps to give themselves an unfair advantage in the midterm elections. Now Virginia has a chance to help level the playing field. If you live in the Commonwealth, early voting begins March 6th, Election Day on April 21st. Vote yes." Dude. Are you serious, man? Here is Barack Obama slithering out from under his rock to talk about Virginia gerrymandering the state. That's what he's worried. That's his priority. I mean, it's so ridiculous. Just historically speaking, okay? Historically speaking, when you look at the 8 years that Obama spent there, other than him just staring at himself in a mirror and thinking that he hung the moon, here were Barack Obama's achievements, okay? Number one, Obamacare. Okay. His number one achievement was Obamacare. And Obamacare was so great. What did we do earlier this year? We shut down the government for what? How long? 16, whatever it was, to talk about Obamacare subsidies for a program that's broken within 10 years that conservatives say this is never going to work, for a Ponzi scheme. So his signature achievement, Obamacare, is a Ponzi scheme that doesn't work. What's his second achievement, historically speaking? The Iranian nuclear deal. So historically speaking, his second biggest accomplishment is the Iranian nuclear deal, and we're launching airstrikes at Iran right now. The Ayatollah is in pieces somewhere. He's in ashes somewhere in a destroyed building, but he has no comment on Iran. This is his legacy, and he doesn't want to talk about it. He's got nothing. He has no comment on Iran. That's his legacy, man. He has no comment. He's out talking democracy. And it's so funny to me. Like, there's nothing more democratic. Like, as a student of political science, I can promise you there's nothing more democratic than actively trying to silence your opposition. To be completely clear, Virginia is 45% red, 55% blue. It's a purplish state. The proposed map that Barack Obama slithered out to talk about, the proposed map for Virginia is going to give 10-1 blue in congressional representation. And I guess according to Barack Obama, democracy is only saved by single party rule. I mean, North Korea is blushing at this guy. Free and fair elections are the cornerstone of our democracy. I mean, Joseph Goebbels is impressed by that. This blew my mind when I saw this thing pop up in my feed. Voting on the VA referendum starts March 6th, Friday. Referendum is in April 21st. This is what he cares about, not Iran, just on gerrymandering, on democracy. I'll tell you what, I've talked about on the show before. You look at the real and the fake. This guy is king fake. He might be the fakest person I've ever seen. He's transparently thin. And I guess if you look any further, like I saw this thing and I had to laugh at it. Here's Obama's democracy. You want to talk about gerrymandering? I'm going to go through some of these. Here's Massachusetts, 36% Republican, 0 congressional representation. Connecticut, 42% Republican, 0 seats in Congress. Maine, 46% Republican, 0 seats in Congress. What is this? New Hampshire, 48% Republican, 0 seats. Rhode Island, 42%, 0 seats. Vermont, 32%, 0 seats. Delaware, 42%, 0 seats. Democracy is making sure Republicans have no representation in Congress. Got it. Thanks for the democracy lesson from the constitutional scholar Barack Obama. But again, his legacy is the Iranian nuclear deal, and he has no comment on it. If you ever want to know who's fake, you can just watch the response. But trust me, I'm going to be watching this Virginia. I think this Virginia thing is so interesting. I'll be watching it very closely. So I'll go ahead and do a switch in gears. I'll just say this real quick. I had a friend that pointed out that my quick hits are actually like these long diatribes. So maybe I just need to stick to switching gears and not quick hits. But anyway, I had written a Korea story, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago when I was like realizing I had not done a Korea story. So I've had this Korea story kind of sitting on my desk and I wanted to go ahead and get it off my plate. But I wanted to go ahead and talk about Korea real quick. And I guess I'll start in the Chosin Reservoir. Now, the Chosin Reservoir is like one of the craziest things ever. And quite frankly, Chosin Reservoir might be the craziest engagement in U.S. history if you look at it that way. And I would strongly urge you, if you ever get the chance, it's actually on Amazon Prime if you look at it, but PBS had a documentary that came out about it. It's called The Battle of Chosin. I would strongly urge you to watch the documentary. It is totally wild to look at. And quite frankly, watching The Battle of Chosin, it's really hard to watch. It's very, very sobering. And quite frankly, watching that documentary the first time, it really makes you understand why the US broadly wanted to forget about Korea. It's called the Forgotten War. But I guess if you look at Chosin broadly, like Chosin Reservoir and the battle that occurred there is like way too complicated to talk about on a single episode of the Foggy Dew. But one of the most heroic things to me that happened at Chosin happened at a place called Fox Hill. So if you look at the situation broadly, the first Marines were encircled and they were trying to break out at Chosin. So here you have the first Marines totally encircled by the Chinese and they're trying to break out. And if you look at the first Marines breakout, like again, different parts of the Chosin battle, that first Marines breakout is one of the most famous fighting withdrawals ever in human history. Now, the first Marines were trying to break out, but the first Marines needed the 7th Marines to hold a pass. Now, the 7th Marines had to hold a place called the Tokong Pass. If the 7th Marines could hold the Tokong Pass, the 1st Marines could break out of the encirclement. Well, control of the Tokong Pass occurred strategically at a place called Fox Hill. So the 7th Marines were ordered to hold Fox Hill so the 1st could break out. Now, the 7th Marines was commanded by a guy named Captain Bill Barber. So here's Captain Bill Barber. He leads the 7th Marine onto Fox Hill. Now, Captain Barber only has 240 Marines. This man was given one order: hold the line. That's it. Those were his only orders: hold the line at Fox Hill. The 7th Marines absolutely 1000% could not allow the Chinese to cut off this pass, otherwise the 1st could not break out. So here you have it. It's November 27th, 1950. The 7th Marines digs in at Fox Hill. 240 Marines. Negative 35 degrees out. Negative 35. So you have 240 Marines in negative 35 degree temperatures opposed by 10,000 screaming Chinese. 10,000 Chinese. You have 10,000 Chinese versus 240 Marines in negative 35 degree temperatures. The Chinese obviously had a numerical advantage. They sent wave after wave after wave at the Marines. Now, it's interesting when you watch the Chinese waves. Normally, what would happen is the first and second wave of Chinese regulars were armed. The third, fourth, fifth, etc., they were not armed. They would just pick up their dead comrades' weapons. The Chinese knew that they were sending these guys into a slaughter. They're just throwing bodies at the Marines. But they just keep coming and coming. The Chinese would not stop. The Marines are totally outnumbered here. They were outnumbered 40-1. This goes on for 5 days. The wind chill over the 5 days hit negative 54 degrees. At a temperature like that, your weapons are freezing. Medical supplies freeze. Blood freezes in wounds. The air was so cold that it was cauterizing wounds. You could have your leg blown off and your leg was separated and the air was so cold that it would cauterize the wound. Well, what else happens when it's that cold? Frostbite sets in. Supplies ran low. Ammo ran out. Marine wounded are piling up. But what happened the whole time? For 5 days, the Chinese kept blowing their bugles, attacking wave after wave after wave. The Marines in the 7th were literally stacking bodies for cover. Now, go back to Captain Bill Barber. Captain Barber was shot twice. He was desperately wounded, and he would crawl to different positions to help defensively. His only rallying cry to his Marines was, "Hold the line. We are Marines, we hold." This went on again for 5 days. 5 days later, help arrived for the Marines. Now, the end net result of this is that the first Marines were able to break out. But the bottom line here is that the 7th Marines were able to hold Fox Hill because of Barber and these heroes. Now, of the 240 Marines that walked into Fox Hill, only 80 walked out. But the 7th Marines held the line at Fox Hill. They held the line at Chosin. Captain Bill Barber won a Medal of Honor for his behavior at Fox Hill. And it's interesting because when he was awarded the Medal of Honor, he said this, quote, "We held because we were Marines," end quote. I said it was hard to watch. Chosin Reservoir is absolutely heartbreaking. People live in comfort today. We live in this comfortable paradise that these people could only dream of. We live in comfort today because 75 years ago, 240 freezing Marines held in negative 54 degree temperatures. And if you look at it, just as a person that cares about history and sacrifice, their sacrifice is really all we should ever talk about. And the casual disregard, if you went around and asked somebody, a younger person, what is Chosin? What happened to Chosin Reservoir? They probably wouldn't have any idea. And I guess we have all these kids in high school and grade school that can't even hardly read. But I really wish they could sit around and talk to kids about things that happened like Chosin Reservoir. I think it should be mandatory that they watch that PBS documentary. It's almost like Band of Brothers. We should be showing Band of Brothers as mandatory viewing for all high school students in the United States of America. And I guess thank God for Bill Barber and thank God for these Marines that gave so much at Chosin Reservoir in the 1st and the 7th, all those guys. And I guess I'll go ahead and close the week out. And I suppose if you look at all this stuff, gang, we're going to all need to hold the line. If you look at what's going on here with China and the situation that they're in and what's going to happen over the next 3 to 6 months, it's going to get wild, man. But the events of 2026 are going to reshape the world. And I said it, I guess, early in the episode, maybe World War III is already kind of underway. Now, it's not like a nuclear war or anything like that, but there is a new world order that's going to be emerging here pretty soon. And I guess the way that I look at it, we're just in a living history book, and we should all just be so thankful. And gosh, thank God for guys like President Trump, Rubio. And again, thank God to all of our brave men and women in uniform. I mean, just how brave are these people? How amazing. They're the best people among us. Okay, so anyway, I'll go ahead and wrap this show up, and I will be talking to you guys next week. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. If you like this show, please go ahead and tell a friend about it. If you would, please follow us on Spotify. You can also follow us on Instagram at Foggy Dew Daily. If you have questions for the show, please go ahead and email us at foggydew95@gmail.com. But in the meantime, I'd ask you to say a prayer, ask questions, and stay vigilant. This is the Foggy Dew signing off.